What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Home Theater Fanatics Live. Tonight is episode 104, and we have a fun episode. It's one of the topics that I really enjoy talking about, and that is ported versus sealed speakers or subwoofers, if you want to think about it from that point of view. And we have two guests with us, very special guests, that know more about this than I will probably ever know in my life. Mark Dalquist and Scott Evans. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah. So I think let's get started with some quick introductions. If you guys could tell everybody who you are and where they might know you from, we'll go ahead and get that done, and then we can kick in. So, Mark, let's start with you.
Well, I'm Mark Dalquist. I'm one of the moderators on the Home Theater Enthusiast group, and I've been in that group for a couple of years now. I'm actually kind of a noob to the group. It never occurred to me to join a Facebook group for audio. I was always the lurker on the AVS forum,
Sure.
But I'm not a full-time audio guy like Scott is. Scott's a true professional. I am a true enthusiast. I'm a bit of a nut. I take things to extremes. Like if a little will do a lot is better.
Absolutely.
But I love the technical side of it. I'm actually a mechanic but I build some pretty esoteric race engines, and we get a lot into wave tuning with induction systems. And that kind of translates a little bit into speaker design somewhat. Anyway, I don't want to drag on, but I love the technical side of it. And that's where we've talked before, where I'm like, come on, Giles, give us some
Just measure it.
Measure it. I want to see it. I want to see it. I'm that guy. And Scott, he's Mr. Audio. I'll let you introduce yourself, Scott.
Yeah, let's move on to you, Scott. Tell us who you are. Welcome.
So my name is Scott Evans, and I'm an audio engineer. I've been in the music industry doing touring work, install work, design, production, the whole scope of things since I was very, very young. I've been about 27 years now that I've been doing it. Been on the road with some of the biggest names in the industry, and more than I can count. I try not to speak too much, but pictures speak leagues, and I like to show my pictures to all my friends. Mark and his wife have seen a ton of my pictures from different shows over the years. I always enjoy helping and teaching. When I get a chance, if I can show somebody something and teach them a good way to do something or a more efficient way to do something they're already trying to do, especially when it comes to audio, I love doing that kind of stuff. So, and I'm a car enthusiast too, so that's kind of how Mark and I met originally, and it turned into me becoming his audio guy because he learned that I can do audio, and now his home theater is a little over the top for most people.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, a little bit. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining me today, and let's go ahead and hop in to this hot topic. So, as people build a home theater, or even if they're just looking at a media room or whatever space that they have, one of the decisions they have to make at some point is, what subwoofer am I going to buy or build? What does this look like? And, not only do you have to deal with, what size do you want, but one of the big decision criteria that people have to really think about is, do they go with a base reflex design or seal design? Now, there are other esoteric designs out there. You can go infinite baffle and other kinds of things. But, today we're really just going to talk about the primary two that if you wanted to go buy something, it's pretty easy to find, subwoofers in these versions. And if you're going to build something, there are many kits that you can buy and build, or you can just do it from scratch, and it's not that tough. So base reflex is it separates itself from sealed in that in a sealed box you just have a box and there's a speaker in it, but in a base reflex box you can either have ports, which is either tubes that go into the box, or if they're slot ported, maybe there's a slot, an extra little piece across the bottom that the sound resonance can resonate the air in that chamber or in that column, or you can do passive radiators on the side as well. But the question is, which one do you go with? And I've noticed what I consider to be gosh, I guess a lot of misconceptions out there about the two. And Mark, maybe you can kick us off with some of the things that you hear people say from time to time that when you hear it, you're like, oh no, let's let's talk about that for a second.
Well, the one that gets under my skin the most is probably ported for movies, sealed for music.
Sure, I've heard that many times.
Yeah, and that's kind of like an old wives' tale. A sealed enclosure or acoustic suspension is literally a sealed box where the driver has to compress the air inside the box, and it provides some driver damping effect. But because of the driver that you would use in the sealed box, it's designed for that. The advantage to a sealed box, and if it's my 1,000% belief. Mm-hmm. If a subwoofer is designed properly, it doesn't matter if it's sealed or ported, it's going to work well for music or for movies, because let's face it, the vast content of movies is music. I mean, that's, and right. The subwoofer is just seeing an electrical input, just like your main LCR speakers, like your Atmos speakers. It's all it has to do is reproduce that, the electrical input that's being provided by the amplifier. So the subwoofer doesn't know if you're listening to Tchaikovsky. It doesn't know if you're listening to Vanilla Ice. It doesn't know if you're listening to
it's interesting that these are the artists that you're just pulling out of your hat here.
Well,
I'm straight to that Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm trying to come up with a wide range of like opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, it doesn't Absolutely. Matter, the subwoofer either can do it or it doesn't. People will talk about sealed for music because they think it's faster. It has quicker bass, it has faster bass. There's no such thing. I actually took some notes today so that I wouldn't forget, and my references are Scott Henson over at DIYRM, Matthew Pose over at Audioholics, and Josh Reiki over at Database. They all have done papers and studies on speed or accuracy. And when you look at like Scott Henson, he's like, when people refer to slow bass, what they're really talking about are room modes, in that which can cause long delays or long decay times, poorly tuned subs, or lack of experience with true deep bass. And I think that's where people get confused, is they don't have any experience with deep bass. You have a small sealed subwoofer that rolls off hard at 30 hertz. They haven't experienced 18 hertz, 16 hertz, 14 hertz like you have in your room. And you know what the difference is, Giles, when you actually have that true extension down low. And because bass waves are so long, it takes them longer to form, longer to develop. And so it could be construed as slow, but that's how bass waves are. That is the nature of the beast. And it has nothing to do with if the cabinet is ported or sealed. And I always like to say that some of the finest loudspeakers in the world, the best measuring loudspeakers, the best that money can buy, are ported. And on the same note, some of the best loudspeakers that money can buy, the finest sounding loudspeakers in the world, are sealed. It's just a different way of doing it. It doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other.
Right on. Well, let's talk about what each of these two different kinds of enclosures actually bring to the table. And we had one question, what about transmission line? That's a different video. Yeah. We're not gonna get into that one now because it's a little more esoteric.
I want to talk about stuff that is commonly available over the counter, like the guy that's putting his theater together. He goes, I want to buy a couple of subs. What should I buy, sealed or ported? And the first response is always, well, sealed for music, ported for movies. And that's the biggest myth that I want to dispel. The nice thing about the advantage to a ported enclosure is it's like having a turbocharger on your car. It's like free output. They're far more efficient, right? The problem is that, and I'm only going to talk about a properly designed enclosure. I'm not going to talk about an enclosure that's too small, too big, ported wrong, whatever. But in a properly designed sealed enclosure, that you're going to see a huge gain in output as we approach port tune. And if the enclosure is tuned to 18 hertz, you're going to pick up right, you're going to have a very, very good flat frequency response to 18 hertz, and then it's going to fall off hard as we go past port tune. A sealed enclosure is going to drop at a natural rate. I think is it 12 dB per octave on a sealed. They roll off real smooth.
I'm not sure
bottom.
if it's first order or second order.
Yeah,
it might be 6 or 12. But,
I forget.
Yeah,
don't quote me on it. I could just pull a number out of my butt. I wouldn't know, but it's.
I'm the audio guy, and I don't even know the rate that it falls off. I just know it falls off.
Yeah, they fall off.
I thought it fell off at about 6 decibels an octave.
So, but the thing is that when we get to a certain point, if we're comparing it to the sealed enclosure, the sealed enclosure will drop off much harder after port tune, and the
bass reflex will.
Yeah, the bass reflex will fall off much harder after port tune, and the sealed enclosure will still be there. So sometimes if we're talking about very, very deep extension, the sealed design can have an advantage down low. To make up for, to try and get the sealed enclosure to perform like the bass reflex, we end up using a lot more digital signal processing. And so people will talk about, well, bass reflex cabinets sound slower, they sound heavy because they have group delay. And
what is that?
Group delay is the amount of time it takes for a frequency to form. So, and you'll see it in a bass reflex, group delay will go up because of the interaction with the port. Whereas on a sealed design, it's a much more linear line.
So that's also like a phase change, right? So when you hit port tuning, and I think I'm correct about this, on a bass reflex design, or tuning of the passive radiators, if you're doing a PR design, once you hit that, and as the frequency I think goes down, the group delay goes up, which translates into a change in the phase. So that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to tune sealed and ported together, because you get that phase change under port tuning in a bass reflex enclosure. Does that sound right to you guys?
You see it in the model. You'll see the phase drop, but the human ear isn't really that sensitive to phase, especially at those frequencies. Like it's not that big of a deal unless you have two drivers that are out of phase with each other. Then it's a big deal.
Sure. If they're 180 degrees out of phase, it's
or 90 or 27 or
right.
But at the end of the day, what happens is people will quote group delay as proof that a sealed enclosure is slower, because a sealed enclosure or a ported enclosure is slower because a ported enclosure will have more group delay. But by the time you put enough DSP in the sealed enclosure to get it to perform like the ported, you've put the group delay back in with the EQ. So they end up being more similar than different. The beauty of a acoustic suspension cabinet is that they're much smaller. So if you don't have the room for a refrigerator-sized subwoofer, the acoustic suspension is a great way to go, because you can fit them almost anywhere. They're so much smaller. I think it was you that I was talking to where how many inches? You have 20 inches below your screen, right, Giles?
Yeah, 20 inches. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's almost impossible to get any kind of large cone-sized driver in a bass reflex box underneath that, because the boxes are just so huge.
Right, but you could do a row of 18s in 20-inch tall boxes.
Yep.
All the way across your front stage. And that is a good argument for using an acoustic suspension rather than a bass reflex, because they fit the area.
Sure.
And one nice thing about doing that is, like Scott has shown me in my room, keeping the drivers within a quarter wavelength of the highest frequency they play at crossover allows the drivers to combine. And instead of having 4 or 5 LFE drivers all separate across the front, when you keep them tight like that, it becomes one driver. They'll combine, and all of a sudden you have one 8-foot wide subwoofer. And that is really, really cool as to how it interacts with the room. Like it definitely makes a difference, and it's measurable as you move the microphone from seat to seat. Scott uses a live measurement system. It's not a sweep like you're used to with REW. Mm-hmm. And so we can actually watch the frequency response live as you move the microphone from seat to seat, or as you move a driver around the room or turn a driver. And it's so much more.
Scott, is that an RTA like a real-time analyzer that you're?
Yeah, sort of. So I use a program called Systune made by AFMG. It's a little bit older of a program. It's been around for a while. It's something that a lot of guys in the music industry use. A lot of people are familiar with the term SMART, SMAART, which is the most common software that people use, and I use that one as well. That with a microphone, a good mic pre, and then basically it puts out a signal through a reference channel, and it listens for it back into itself as well as through the microphone, and it compares the two, and it says, here's signal A, here's signal B. They should line up, and if they don't, there's time involved, and it allows you to calculate that time to line them back up.
Right. That makes sense.
Right. And then with that, because of the nature of how it works in real time. I'm not doing a measurement and then waiting for it to do calculations. It's on the fly.
That's cool. Right on. So, one thing I want to level set on a little bit is, kind of the mechanics of the bass reflex design. So, if you think about bass reflex, you've got typically a speaker, and then you either have precision ports, right? Tubular ports, or a slot port across the bottom or side. And what happens is, as the back pressure of the subwoofer, as it moves backwards into the box, it's going to then excite that air inside of that column. So what's interesting about a bass reflex design is that it's really working the hardest the farther it is away from port tuning, because the farther it is away from port tuning, it actually is much like a sealed enclosure. And as the frequency moves down toward port tuning, the air in that column, so it doesn't blow air in and out, right? So people think of it as kind of like a fan. It's just blowing air. But really, as the subwoofer vibrates, that air moves as well. So the air is moving in the column as it creates that longitudinal wave of sound. So you'll feel the air at the actual port move in and out there. So that's what the wind is, so to speak. But what's really interesting is that at port tuning, the bass reflex design is actually the most efficient. It has to work least hard to produce sound at that point. And that's why you get, 10 decibels bump, depending on the environment itself at port tune. So that's the kind of free extra output that you've talked about before, that you don't see in a sealed enclosure, because sealed enclosure is working hard all the time with that constant back pressure. So that's the primary difference. Now, another downfall, I don't guess it's a downfall, but another consideration in the bass reflex design is, as the frequency moves under port tuning, the subwoofer loses its ability to control the cone as well. So that's how you can blow up a sub pretty hard. You hit a bass reflex design with 5 hertz, all out, and that thing just it'll go nuts, right? Because it doesn't have any back pressure back there to hold it in place. And that's why you see everyone putting in high pass filters at 20 hertz, 18 hertz, 15 hertz, whatever it might be, to protect those subwoofers from that excessive cone excursion at low frequencies. So now, anything to add to that? I do want to take a couple of questions that folks are
that's
throwing
around. That's the beauty of the sealed design, is if you want more, you just throw more power at it, and you can literally keep throwing power at it until you overheat the voice coil.
Absolutely.
You
or you hit the mechanical limit of the sub, right?
It's a mechanical limit is usually, it's hard to hit on a sealed box because you're fighting itself, right? You're fighting the pressure. So you get a little extra power handling from having the pressure behind it. Don't think it's like some massive amount. It's not like, I have a sub rated at 800 watts and now I can put 2000 watts into it and drive it to the clipping point. You're still going to blow it up if you clip the amplifier, right? You put a square wave into a speaker, heats up the coil, you destroy the speaker. Simple as that. But you can definitely drive them harder and longer when it's sealed, because the cabinet is helping you with the control. When you go to port, it no longer has that back pressure to help control. And the further you push the driver, the further you get towards that X max, towards its mechanical limit. And the mechanical limit's often what you blow up when you're pushing 5 hertz in a speaker. It's not because it can't do the 5 hertz. It's because you've already pushed it beyond its physical space, and reproducing 5 hertz to make it the same volume as 20 hertz takes a lot more power and a lot more energy.
Yep, that makes complete sense. Okay, so a couple of things here, some comments. Joey Peacock says, "What's up, folks? Excited for the episode." Mr. Peacock hails from Indie Audio Labs, which is Accurus and Aragon. Nice to see you, man. Glad to have you. Big Hat Racing, that I'm not familiar with. Welcome, Big Hat Racing.
That's our friend Bill.
That's our buddy Bill.
Right on. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show. Hopefully you'll become a regular viewer here with us. He says, ported or sealed, is there a really well-defined preference for home theater? Mark, I know you have a very definitive opinion about this, so maybe and we touched on it already. Can you reinforce that one more time?
Well, it's room dependent, it's budget dependent, it's size dependent. I prefer ported subs myself, but if I had a smaller room, I'd probably have sealed in there just because they'd fit. But I like the free output that you get from a ported design. I just do. I mean, I prefer ported. That's my preference.
Right on.
The thing to remember is today's speaker designs are much lighter and much more accurate and faster than they've ever been in the past. You know, if you go way back to 60s and 70s, speakers were okay, but they were all kind of heavy enclosures. They weren't very lightweight. They weren't made out of the newest, greatest, best materials for the most part. If you bought a speaker at the local music store, it was a heavy speaker. And today's speakers get lighter and lighter and better magnets and better structures and better coils. And so when you're thinking about putting stuff in the home theater, you can't really look at it as ported or sealed anymore. Both can respond exactly the same if you put the right money into the driver itself and the box and the tuning of it. Right? It becomes a money object. Which is the best for your room? What's your budget?
Sure, right on. And I'll also agree with Mark that, at least for me, it's very true that the space considerations dictate a lot of what I want to do, because if I want to do that row of subs across the front, base reflex design just not going to work for me. I just don't have the space for it. But I could put 4 or 5 sealed 18s down there and it would fit, it would look good. I need to spend more money on power and stuff, but you know, that is what it is. All right, here's a long comment that I've not read yet.
Let me before you read the comment, I want to say one more thing, because you just did a subwoofer test with actual measurements. I was so proud of you. You did a subwoofer test
I've grown up.
with actual measurements on Saturday, and your 2 favorite subwoofers, the ones that you liked how they sounded the best, one was ported, one was sealed. And you know, like, there isn't a definitive answer as to one is better than the other one. There's applications where one is more desirable than the other, like Scott said, with budget, or like you said with space, that may dictate one design over another.
Or the wife factor.
Correct.
Sometimes call it, right? Sometimes it's as simple as the other person in the house says, you can't have this big thing here, get something small.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you know, there are great small options, like that little SVS 12, the SB 2000 Pro. That thing does work. And you know, they've engineered enough EQ into that thing where it measures really good no matter probably where you have it. They make sure it looks good, but I like the way that one sounds. All right, so let's do this comment. It's from Facebook user, the nameless masses. I'm going to argue the other side of this. No, speakers do not know what they are reproducing, but aren't our expectations for a movie different than our expectations for music? With movies, I'm expecting dialogue and explosions over elegance and articulation. With music, what do you guys think about that?
Why can't you have both? It either does.
If you tune it properly and put the right speakers in it, it'll do both superbly.
Right on. Yeah, I think that really is the overarching message here, is that the idea that one has to be used for one design has to be used for one purpose and one design has to be used for another purpose doesn't ring true. It's not factual. You can use either design for any purpose, because all you're doing is reproducing sound, and you know, you want a sealed or a ported design to have the same level of dynamics, you know, either or, right? You know, if it was true that one just couldn't do it, I think it would just, you know, that kind of subwoofer would have fallen off a long time ago. Nobody would use it because it wouldn't do it, but they do.
Let's face it. If you have a single 10-inch sealed in a 15 by 20 room, and you try and play the opening to Edge of Tomorrow at reference, it ain't happening. Yeah, it just ain't happening.
Not going to work.
You know?
There's no replacement for displacement.
But at the same time, here's what people understand. So let's say you have 4 18-inch subs to do that. Fine. But if you're playing a regular concert, let's say you're listening to Alicia Keys or Reba McEntire, and there isn't any content below 30 hertz, well, those 18-inch subs with that extension down to 10 hertz, it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that they can't play articulately all the way up to 80 hertz or 120 hertz, where your crossover is. They're just fine. It just means that they can do more than what the small 10-inch can do, because they have more cone area. They can respond better. The less a driver has to move, the better it's going to sound. No driver is going to sound great when it's being pushed to its very limits. It's just
Sure.
It's not going to happen. Like the less it has to do, the better it's going to sound. Which is why we've broken mine into various drivers for various frequencies, is so that it doesn't have to do so much.
That makes complete sense. My buddy Mike says sealed with proper power will blow your face off.
So will ported.
Yeah. I think you're running the sealed in your environment, and I'm sure you can attest to that. And I've run in the past a bunch of ported, and man, it all can get loud. There's no doubt it can all get loud. Here's another Big Hat Racing. What does put enough DSP into the bass reflex to offset group delay mean?
Oh,
this is a comment before.
Yeah, not to offset group delay, Bill. It's when you put the DSP in to bring the output of the sealed sub up to where a ported would be, so that it doesn't roll off so hard. By the time you put enough EQ in it, by the time you go plus 12 dB and plus 10 dB and plus 8 dB in the EQ, you end up adding group delay, and the response tends to mimic what a ported box would do as far as group delay. So they become very similar by the time you have the performance very similar. Like the performance of the speakers become very similar.
To add to that, the term group delay is kind of a term that people like to use, but you also think about it in terms of EQ and phase, right? Because that's what characterizes everything in it. And if by adding DSP, you're typically adding EQ, is most of the time what you're doing. And EQ creates phase changes. So that's what's happening when your group delay is changing. It's because that phase measurement is changing because of the EQ you've added. So I can look at a graph, and I can see the way the phase is moving through the speaker from the low frequencies to the upper frequencies. And if I change the EQ, if I start flat and I put a little bump or a little dip in it, I'm going to see a change in that exact same spot where the EQ is in the phase relationship of the sound as well. So that's why you're seeing that group delay change. You're pushing the phase around because you're changing the EQ.
That makes sense to me. Absolutely. So here's a question from Mr. Peacock. So let's ask Mark what he would install in my room. And so just so you know, mine's like a square 14.5 by 14.5 with one row. And today I've got 3 subs behind the seating. And you understand my screen situation. So what would you, Mark, choose to put in my room with the limited knowledge that you have, just off the cuff kind of stuff?
Well, with what I've learned from Mr. Evans, the subs behind the seating would be removed, and we'd have a row of however many sealed 18s I could fit across the front. If I could fit 8 across the front, I'd have 8. If I could do 10, I'd have 10. But wall to wall across the front, below the screen, sealed 18s with as much power as I could afford to buy.
Yeah, so maybe 4.
With the description, I don't necessarily say they have to be 18s, but the 18s tend to have an easier time to reproduce the deep low stuff that we're typically looking for in a movie in the LFE channel.
I tend to go for the biggest that will fit. Like, I'm that guy, and I know that with 20 inches, I could squeeze an 18 in there. I mean, it's tight, but it could be done, and that's why I went to the 18.
That makes sense. And this is anecdotal, and I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, but I don't know that there are a lot of 21-inch driver designs out there that stray really far away from kind of the PA driver with like a 30 hertz FS or 35 hertz or something, that are designed for kind of low frequency work. the Kraken, the new one, kind of is supposed to do that, but I don't think it's even
The-
perfect itself.
if
So
you
I don't
really
know.
want, if you really want the big bad boy, you go to the 24-inch stereo
24,
integrity.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
But the problem there is that it's done, at 80 hertz. Like it's so big that your spacing is so far that it doesn't play well into the upper registers. So you need to keep that into account. Like if you want to go after that 10 hertz output, you need to have a main that's going to be really strong to 40 hertz or so, because you're going to be crossing it at 60. That's just all there is to it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because
Now,
as that
Or you're going to use it as a supplement to the bottom end of things and have a different sub to take care of that stuff in the 40 to 80 range. A lot of times in the large side of concerts, we have some subs that have 21s, and we typically use them for deep, deep low stuff. Almost always it ends up being, this is a sub that stops around 40. Sorry, we're done there. And then the next speaker is taken over, and we're dealing with 40 to 80 through something else, because it's hard to drive that large of a driver and make it respond well on the upper side.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's take a pause for a second. I got to handle some show business here. Today, for all of the headphone aficionados out there that are watching, I do a headphone of the week, and I chose to go a little bit different this time. And this is about as far away from an audiophile headphone as you can get. This is a straight up gaming headphone for kids, and the company's called Puro Sound Labs, and this is the Puro Gamer. And the claim to fame on this headphone is not that it sounds good, because doesn't really sound all that good, but it's volume limited to, I think, about 75 decibels, so that if your kids use this, they're not going to scramble their brains out with too loud of music. And when you get into the whole, so this is really cool. And there you can actually attach a microphone and plug it right in, and it's got USB as well as a 3.5 millimeter plug on it. I stole this from my children so I could bring it on the show today. But I kind of rest a little easier when they're doing whatever they're doing on the computer, knowing that they're not cranking this thing up and potentially causing some ear damage at their delicate young ages. So anyway, the Puro Gamer, if you're interested in gaming and with children, and you don't want them to jack up their ears like mine are jacked up, get them some cool headphones. All right, so but back to the topic at hand today, and this is a good, interesting comment. Meltdown Detroit, welcome, Meltdown. I think you're a first timer with us. I don't remember you from before, so welcome to the show. He says ported is automatically 3 decibels louder, isn't it? I don't think that's true. I think you get more volume out of a bass reflex design at port tuning, but the farther you move away from that, I think it becomes more in line with sealed as you go up. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll overlap. Once you get away from port tune, it'll act like a acoustic suspension driver. It's only in the lower registers as you approach port tune where you start to get the boost.
Right on.
And it can be a lot more than 3 dB. I mean, it can be.
Yeah, I thought it was like up to 10 decibels or something. I mean, and that's
it can be very, very significant.
Yeah, if we throw around these dB kind of things, because we look at the charts all the time, and you kind of get a feel for what 3 decibels more is and not. And 3 decibels is an appreciable amount. You can tell a difference, right? You can hear a 3 decibel difference for sure. And 10 decibels, does that equate to twice as loud? I think double. A lot of people will anecdotally say, "Oh, that's almost twice as loud."
It is twice as loud. That's double the volume.
Yeah, that's a lot of volume. So when Mark says it's like getting free subwoofers using bass reflex, it's literally like getting extra ones around that port tuning, because it is so much more output than you get out of sealed. And so with sealed, you just got to either add more power or add more drivers to have that same effect. And that comes down to, like Scott said, money.
You do have to be careful about your port tuning too, because if you build a port that is 10 dB louder, that's suddenly a gigantic hump in your room frequency stuff that's going on there. Whatever your response is, that's a massive hump. So you do want to try to limit what you're doing with that to make it beneficial for the response, but not so much extra that it goes out of whack and is totally different. Car stereo guys at competitions, that's what they want. Yeah, give me all the dB I can out of this port, as loud as I can make this sub to break windows. That's what their goal is. But in home theater, we're looking for an even response. We're looking for it to be close to as flat as possible while still being musical.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know the answer to this question. Port tuning is Helmholtz resonance, right? I don't know what Helmholtz resonance is. And he says, so there will be a peak somewhere. Yes. What do you? I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know the term.
Yeah, the peak, Bill, is going to be at port tune. That's what the boost is the Helmholtz resonance. It's where I was touching on when you're building a race engine. That's what we deal with is Helmholtz resonators, and that's what the boost comes from. That's how it works. And the peak is port tune. So if the speaker is tuned at 20 hertz, that's where the peak will be. You'll also get peaks in octaves above that. So you'll see a resonance if you have a 20 hertz port tune. You'll see a resonance at 40. You'll see a resonance at 80. It may not be very pronounced, but it's there.
Right on. Okay, so let's shift gears again, and there's a topic that I want to talk about because this is an area where I continue to educate myself, and that's really as you think about taking 2 or more subwoofers in your home theater and tuning those in a system. One of my concerns really is kind of the time domain of all these subwoofers, because I really want to understand kind of that impulse response with subs. Consider a room where you'll have subs at different distances from your main listening position. What is a good way to handle that, right? Because I'll hear of people tuning subs and they'll say you take a sub and then you take the second sub, right? And you run your sweep with them both playing, and you compare just having one playing to both playing and see if you have constructive or deconstructive resonance, right? Or addition of some, look at what you got. And if you don't like it, add a millisecond, run it again, then add another millisecond, run it again, add another millisecond, run it again. And then people are like, I'm adding 13 milliseconds of delay to one of my subs. And that way I get the most constructive bass addition. So it's the loudest or the smoothest, but doesn't that just absolutely destroy the coherence of the bass and just make it smeared in time? I mean, I look at that and I just feel like that's the worst thing that you could possibly do. I mean, for me, just as kind of our first step for tuning subwoofers, I just measure stuff out and then add in enough delay to where the sound should be arriving at the same time. And I kind of start from there. And Scott, do you have some ideas or some thoughts around this process? Because it just feels like that, adding so much delay in where you're like 360 degrees out of phase and then 700 and then 1,000 and 2,000 degrees out of phase or something, seems like that just kind of destroys the sound.
So I do have quite a bit of experience with this. This is what we do every day on the job in a live concert, right? You walk in and you've got to make 2 speakers from very different spots in the space work together and sound good. Mm-hmm. And we look at things in both a time, frequency, phase. We look at various things when we look at it. So we'll take a measurement and we're going to look for the impulse response. And we look at that impulse response in multiple ways. We can look at it in the phase response to see where it seems to be the flattest of the phase responses, which typically tells you where that response actually is. Often the calculation that's done, you can get some things that arrive sooner than the actual impulse does for alignment from the calculations that are done in the software, and you can get errors. That happens. It's low end. It's hard to measure, and we have to look at the peaks and determine which one is the actual impulse response sometimes. And then we look at the second one and you try to make those line up. If they're similar in distance and physical distance, they shouldn't be too dissimilar in timing unless you've got some really, really crazy DSP done to one of them, a different crossover point or something. Unless there's something going on, they should be reasonably close to the same. Once you get beyond a certain point, you're moving outside of a wavelength, and now they're no longer adding or subtracting from one another. Now they're just a whole wavelength apart. They're not really doing anything. They're just creating a smear. If you're
they're
within
playing different parts of the music or the audio.
They're doing that number instead of right. So that time smear that you hear, that your ears can probably hear at probably 30 or 40 milliseconds, right, A microphone can pick that up down to nanoseconds, down to little splits if you have the right processing to be able to measure the signal. And so we'll look at the subs, and typically we try to place them so they're in similar areas to make them combine naturally rather than having to deal with combining in DSP. It's always better to let them combine naturally when possible. But we know that sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't put 3 subs in the front of the room or 4 subs up there. Sometimes you got to space them in weird spots because that's what your furniture does. You know, you got to play with the room. So we'll try to. I don't necessarily look at the response so much as how they're interacting with each other right away. I'm looking at how the phase response reacts when I turn the second one on. If it completely destroys it and goes to garbage when I look at it, then I know that it's not right. If it stays consistent, then I know I'm probably in the right zone. I'm at least within a very, very small window of being correct, and I can look at the actual physical measurement of the impulse response. Looks like a wave on the screen in the software that we use, and I can look at that and align the humps of it. I can see that there's a peak and a second peak, and when those 2 peaks line up, I'm probably in the right spot.
Right. Yeah, you've got that time alignment, right, where everything's kind of arriving at the same time. Yeah, makes sense.
Right. And we do the same thing when we're looking at sub to top box as well, because now I've got to think about, how am I aligning that?
So a lot of people don't know what a top box is.
Your main speaker. We'll say your main speaker, right? So my top box is going to be anything that produces the frequencies above the subwoofer, right? My subwoofer is doing, let's say, 20 to 85 or 20 to 90, 20 to 100, somewhere in there. My top speaker, my top box is going to be doing from that crossover point of 85 to 100-ish up to wherever the next driver is. Maybe it's the horn, maybe it's, depends on the box. Some boxes are passive with a bunch of drivers. Some boxes you do active with, maybe it's a single 15 and a tweeter up top. And so maybe your next crossover point is like 1600 or 2K or 3000, depending on the tweeter driver, right? Maybe it's a passive box. So I'm just considering the top box as everything that's reproduced above the subwoofer.
Got it.
But when I look at that, I have to align that to match the sub as well, because that crossover point, even though I'm rolling it off, there's 2 speakers creating a frequency there. And those 2 speakers create a smear. There was an interesting light bulb moment for Mark when we moved to an all active design in his home theater, because I was able to turn off the delay and turn back on the delay so we could hear an aligned speaker versus a not aligned speaker. The not aligned speaker doesn't sound horrible, but when you aligned it, all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, that's amazing. Suddenly breaths and music come to life because there's not a smear of things in between where that crossover point is, and that happens in your subs. If you smear the subs, that's where you get people saying, oh, the ported subs sound like they're slow and sloppy and blah, blah. Well, maybe it's the alignment that's the problem, not the sub itself. There are a lot of things that you can blame on sloppiness. And the first one I always go to is the alignment, because that's the primary cause. And 1 millisecond is enough to be sloppy.
See, I agree with that. Absolutely. 1 millisecond. And that equates approximately to the distance that sound will travel in 1 second, if I remember correctly. So, that's 1 millisecond of delay it's like you moved your speaker a foot one way or the other, just depending on if you add where you add your delay at. So that's a lot of change. That is significant. And I see people adding 7 or 10 milliseconds, with speakers that are right beside each other. So, it's like you moved them this far away, and then it gets into that thing where you were showing with your hands, where the sound isn't like this anymore. This, you get into some definitive. You can hear them differently.
There can be some large amounts of delay time from a subwoofer to your next driver, right? Depending on the DSP being used for the crossover, it can add significant amounts of time to make that response happen. So it doesn't necessarily mean because they're sitting side by side that they will both be 0. You have to look at it objectively to know that, hey, my processor might be adding something to be able to make that crossover work that way.
Right on. Yeah, I was trying to draw that out in a perfect world scenario where the signal gets to the sub at the same time. So they're going to be completely in phase with each other. That makes total sense. let me see a couple of things. Okay, so this is another topic that comes up a lot with subtuning in room, which is room modes, right? And don't I want to get a bunch of subwoofers and scatter them all around the room to help deal with room modes? Any comment about that?
It's called pick your compromise.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Sometimes you got to pick a compromise. In general, your compromise becomes either you have that time smear or you have some frequency deviations to fix. You can do things to get around it, but often getting around it means adding more subs, right? If I put a big wall of subs up front and create one giant subwoofer response, those room modes tend to not be as drastically noticed as when you just have a single one, because now my driver is as wide as the room.
Yeah, see, I've already started looking at what would be the right set of 4 18s to put under my screen just to play with it as a good experiment. I think that'd make a good video. And speaking of videos, thanks to all the people that are watching tonight. If you haven't had a chance yet, please subscribe, hit the bell so you'll be notified when videos drop. All that normal stuff that all the YouTube people say. I would appreciate it. That's awesome. Okay, now we are going to shift gears a little bit here. We can get back to the tech discussion in a minute, but one of the things that we like to cover is not only the nuts and bolts of a topic, but we also like to talk about the content that people watch, because that's really why we build these systems, right? And since this is primarily dedicated to home theater and television, I like to call out a couple of things, and I specifically want to talk about the little things. And I don't know if you guys have seen The Little Things yet, but that's one of the HBO Max movies that came out, simultaneously on Max and at the theater. And, it stars Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, and Jared Leto. And those three guys do a great job in the movie. But, I'm going to talk about this for about, 5 minutes and give my quick review. But everyone recognize we are going straight into spoiler world. This is gonna ruin this movie if you haven't seen it yet and you care about it. So if you do, you mute this out for just a couple of minutes. So I thought the movie was good. The acting was awesome. I don't think anybody will win an Oscar or Academy Award from this, but what I didn't like about it is the twist. And the twist in the movie really is where you have people that you think are the good guys, but then they end up kind of being the bad guys, and this is all it's a PD mystery of who committed all these murders, and it ends up that the guy that you were rooting for to be the murderer wasn't, but all the people that are trying to catch the murderer all ended up being murderers. And it wasn't a twist that was super surprising. I think they were trying to get that Seven effect, if you remember Brad Pitt, what's in the box, and they wanted you to have that feeling, and it really didn't accomplish it. What it really accomplished for me is saying, oh man, the guys that I was rooting for just ended up being crap, and I'm sad now, because now the people that are supposed to be awesome suck. And this bad guy, he became a victim. So I don't know, it's an interesting watch. And Mark, I don't think you've seen this one. Scott, did you see this one yet by any chance? Okay, right.
No,
on.
I haven't seen that one yet. I'll see it eventually. I tend to be a little behind the times on them. I kind of I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't have a lot of time to watch them at home, but when I do, I try to catch up. I don't mind having spoilers. It doesn't bother me.
Right on. Yeah. So this one, I was hoping for a little bit more from it. And this isn't the typical whiz bang movie that I'll talk about with the big special effects and the superheroes and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to talk about this one a bit because there goes the ball. There goes Mark's ball. He's like, watch for the ball because it's going to happen. There it went. But I wanted to call this one out because a lot of people spend a lot of money on HBO Max because they want to get all these movies that are coming out, and they don't want to take a trip to the theater these days. But for this one, for me, I think it's just a rental, and I would give it a miss unless you're just a big fan of any of the stars of the movie. So guys, any particular content that you've seen recently that's stood out to you that you've really enjoyed? It could be music, it could be television or a movie. Anything that you would recommend to the viewers out there?
So for me, one of the things, and I introduced Mark to this, was a singer called Dua Lipa. She's got an album that sounds phenomenal. It's really, really good. It's well produced. It's well mixed. The video content's good if you happen to catch videos on YouTube or wherever. But overall, sonically, it's a really solid album, and it's good sounding. It's nice to listen to, and you can listen to it quiet or loud. So that's probably one of the things that stood out to me as more recent. I don't have anything like yesterday recent that's
Sure.
stuck on me, but that was definitely something.
Now, what genre of music is that? What would people
It's kind
call
of
it? Pop?
It's all pop.
Oh, so, all right. So I'll reach out and I'll get I'll make sure that I have the correct artist, and I'll put a link down in the video for everybody. So if you want to check that out, you'll be able to find that and take a listen. I plan to take a listen as soon as I validate exactly the right album to listen to. What about you, Mark? Anything on the media side of the house that's interesting to you these days?
Well, I've been on a 3D kick because over the years, have avoided 3D because I saw it in the theater and I hated it. I just hated
I
it
hate
in the
it
theater.
too.
And someone told me, well, it's different at home. So I bought some glasses and I got Avatar and I watched it. I went, okay, that's pretty cool. And then I found there's a setting in my Blu-ray player and I watched Dread and I went, wow, and anyway, I watched Journey to the Center of the Earth in 3D.
Is that the one with The Rock?
No, that's the Rock is the second one. That's the one to the Magic Island or the Hidden Island.
Okay.
The Journey to the Center of the Earth was with that Brandon.
Oh yeah. I know you're talking about the one in the Mummy. That dude.
Yeah, and it was literally like it was the most incredible experience watching that one. I just absolutely loved the movie. So in 3D.
I now know what we're watching the next time I come out.
That's cool. And to go back to what you said about Avatar, that movie has held up very well. I mean, it's
supposed to be the gold reference for 3D. There was a setting in my Blu-ray player I didn't know about, and the 3D for it was okay. I need to rewatch it.
Right on. That's cool. Yeah. So I just watched it in 2D with my kids 3 months ago or something like that. And they're 9 and 11 right now. So this was their first go around with Avatar, and they absolutely loved it. And I watched it, and this is over the years my theater has gotten better and better and better, and this is the best that it's been so far, right? And it was an even better experience than I've ever seen it in the past. And I don't even believe there's a 4K version of that out yet. I don't think. So we were watching in 1080p, and it was still pretty awesome. I was excited about that. But yeah, so thanks for those call outs on the media as we have entered and now exit out of Content Corner. So a couple of things, next week we will have Adam Sommer on the show. He is a manufacturer rep for a number of different hardware companies that make hi-fi devices of different types, everything from not AVRs, but integrated amplifiers to amps to record cleaners to cables to streaming devices, all kinds of stuff. So he represents a number of different companies, and I think it'll be interesting to talk to him because this is an aspect of the business that not a lot of people really take a close look at. You understand what things are like from a consumer's point of view, and then you have people like me who talk about products and that kind of stuff and have these kind of shows, and then you have the actual companies who make it, and then sometimes people have relationships with the resellers, but there's this marketing piece where you have these people that sit in between these manufacturers and then the marketing and the resellers and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of an interesting niche to be in that I don't think gets a lot of coverage. So we're going to have Adam on. He's a really nice guy. And, I've known him for a couple of years now, and he reps, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 different companies right now. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And then this Friday, the video coming out on the channel will be all about theater seating and why it's important. Just like, choosing between ported and sealed, that's an important decision. Well, if you don't have something nice to park your butt in, it makes everything a lot less enjoyable. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And I know it seems elementary. Yeah, you gotta have a sofa, but man, I can tell you what, when you get a chair that reclines and gives you some headrest and maybe some lumbar support so you can kind of get things tweaked out, that goes a long way when you're watching a marathon of all 6 Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movie in extended edition, and you're going to be there for like 20 hours. So that's kind of cool. All right. So
Okay,
we
you gotta
will.
have good snacks for that.
You do need good snacks for that, and maybe some caffeine and a lot of bathroom breaks. So let's switch back and take a couple more questions before we round things out tonight. So question for you from Triple D, Mark. What setting was that? And is that on your Oppo or?
Yeah, on the Oppo, it had a setting for screen size, and the default setting from the factory is like 46 inches. And so it really didn't give a lot of depth to the 3D until when I moved it out to 120 inches, it was a whole different experience. And I had
the ball.
Yeah, there it goes. But that's why I need to rewatch Avatars. I just had a setting wrong in the Blu-ray player.
Right on. And then Triple D also says he's not happy at all with the sound he gets from HBO Max from his 4K Roku. He streamed Tenet last night from Amazon Prime. The sound of New Wonder Woman was bad. So was the video quality. Why? Probably just streaming. that's my guess.
Well, and you might find that a different device does better. I've seen a lot of people say that they didn't like Roku, or they didn't like the NVIDIA Shield, or they didn't like this thing for that. Like, there are different ones that work well for different people, and a lot of things depend on the content you're using, and some of them upscale better when necessary. So a lot of the content isn't really 4K, but it's upscaled and shows you that it's 4K even though it isn't. And so you might try a different device just to try it. Like, even something as simple as just buy a Fire Stick, because they're $40 and it's an easy, quick trial, and you can see if it looks better on that. It might simply be the device itself doesn't like that streaming content.
I'll agree with that. And every device has different hardware and a different software implementation. So, it's you get what you get, and sometimes you just got to try different stuff.
What is the streaming you talk about?
It's something.
Well, you got to have internet for that.
Yeah, it's something for all of us plebeians that don't go for the best of the best. Although I need internet for my best of the best because I'm doing it off Kaleidoscape, and we won't get into that now. But I'm totally jealous of that. I love Kaleidoscape because it's so easy. Because I don't like media and I don't like streaming, and if you don't like media and you don't like streaming, Giles, you don't like media. Do me a quick favor. Turn around 180 degrees. What's behind you? About 1,000 books. Yeah. What is that? What would that be considered? That's a different kind of media. So, okay, I guess I have to qualify my statement because you are correct. I do like physical media, but it's all the printed word. I don't collect Blu-rays, and I really don't want to put a Blu-ray in a player when I want to watch something. But I don't like the quality of streaming. So I want the quality of the disc and the convenience of the streaming. And right now there's only one game in town, and it costs 2 arms and a leg to get on board with it, which is the downside. But the upside is that it's freaking awesome. It's super cool. But that's another argument for another day. Big Hat also says Brendan Fraser. Thanks. Yep, you're absolutely right. So, guys, I think we're closing in on the hour. We can go to some final thoughts now. And Mark, anything left to add that you want to comment on before we close this one down for the night? Not really. The biggest one I wanted to touch on was the ported for movies and sealed for music. And like I said, I feel they're the same. They both offer the same performance depending upon how you utilize them. Right on. Cool. And Scott, any parting words of wisdom from a true professional's point of view? And I really appreciate you coming on the show because this is something that you do day in and day out, and you get to see the impact of these small changes that you can make in these big venues where we see one room and that's kind of all we get to ever play with. Any parting wisdom for us? Well, being that I work in an industry that is at a standstill right now due to a virus that we have to be protective of,
I just tell people, hire a professional to help you. If you have the extra money and budget, let a professional help you, because right now we're all sitting at home because we can't go do the live shows to make you happy. So even if it's just consultation, even if it's something simple, sometimes asking the right questions or asking the wrong questions to get the answers that you didn't know you needed is more helpful than just pushing knobs and turning dials and trying to do it yourself. A lot of people struggle through, I can't get my system to sound good, I need to buy better speakers, when in reality, it might just be simply, hey, you need to make this one small change and this will fix all your problems. So sometimes it's simple as consultation, hire us to come in and actually work on your system. Mark has done that with me. The reason his system is where it is because I went, hey, watch this one little change. Let me teach you something.
Can I tell a short
and now
story
he
of that,
asks
Giles?
questions all the time.
Let me tell let me tell a short story about that. I was working in my room and I was doing the DIY acoustic treatments and I was doing the DIY this and the DIY that. And I had found out, I didn't even know that Scott was a pro audio guy for the first 2 years I knew him, because he's my race car buddy, And he's like, well, yeah, I do some audio, and I was asking him some questions about treatments. And he makes this comment. He goes, the best thing you could do is just, hire me to come out there. I go, well, you do this? He's like, yeah, I do this. So we made a deal and he came out and I had the system set up and I had my JBL L7s, which were my pride and joy for 27 years or something. I bought them in 92 and I carried them through 2018 or 2019.
And they're still a decent sounding speaker.
And I had everything set up and I picked Scott up at the airport. We went in the room and I turned it on and I think it was ZZ Top I was playing and I was so proud of it because it just sounded awesome. It just sounded awesome. And Scott listened to it for about 30 seconds and he goes, boy, have we got a lot of work cut out for us.
And so I think that's a great example of you don't know what you don't know.
Ignorance is bliss.
Exactly.
Ignorance is bliss.
That's right. Things you know, things you don't know, and things you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah, well, and the ones that you don't know, those are the dangerous ones. If you can be self-aware and know you don't know something, that's great. But when you don't know, man, that's where you kind of get into hot water.
Mark has gotten to a point where he knows that he doesn't know. Yeah. He knows that now that's a topic that exists. Hey, I didn't know that I didn't know this. How do I ask the question? And so a lot of times, and this goes towards my same thing of hiring somebody to consult with, is you don't have to know the right questions. Sometimes you just got to fumble through it as best as you can, and we'll piece together the question you're trying to convey because we have the experience to do so. We know what you're trying to do once you start explaining it. We can speak jumbled language if we have to.
That makes good sense. And, I think my parting words for everyone today is, don't think of subwoofers and sound in general in absolutes, right? There are always going to be compromises in a room, pretty much anywhere. And the goal is to find out what works best in your situation. And, from this point of view, it could be sealed or it could be ported, and they both can be made to work really, really well, depending on space, equipment you have available to you, budget, the amount of money you can spend on things, and what your desired outcome is. So don't think in absolutes. Ask questions, learn a lot, experiment, and don't be scared to change if you need to, because we don't always get it right the first time around. And part of the journey is to good sound is the journey, right? There is a destination, but there's a lot of joy in that process of moving through and making things better and better. That's why I can never stop upgrading, because I just keep moving that gold ring farther and farther out.
I don't want to talk about the upgrades anymore.
I know it is a
I think I've cost Mark a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's the danger when you have somebody come in and say, no, we need to do this, and this. You're like, oh, I can do that. Here's 12.
I always tell him it's his choice, but I show him once with one. I get that's it. If I can show you once and you learn the difference, then you think differently about it. And unfortunately, that's the dangerous part, is you have to be willing and open-minded to the fact that you might learn something that makes you hate what you have and want to upgrade to change it for the better.
Yeah. And, a great place to go if you want to learn and ask questions is the forum that Mark moderates, Home Theater Enthusiasts. So, that's a great spot. I hang out there a lot. You can also come to mine, which is totally better home theater fanatics. It's only like a third the size, not even a third the size. I think home theater enthusiasts, though, is one of the biggest ones out there right now. It's like almost 30,000 members strong, and 100 posts a day or something. It's it is a behemoth in the world of home theater forums on Facebook. So it's a good one to be involved with, and you'll be in safe hands with Mark moderating. He doesn't let people like me get all those nasty YouTube links up there that take away focus from the group. So I would strongly recommend that you guys check that out, and I'll make sure there's a link down below in the description so you can find that easily, so you can go sign up. So guys, thank you so much. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey Giles, just so you know, there's a guy in Home Theater Enthusiasts looking for IT people. So, there's always room for someone else to come help.
Right on. Absolutely. And that's the great thing about having a community, right? And especially when you have a large community that has some nice guidelines and railroad tracks to live on. It's a wonderful place to be, to go and talk with people that share that same enthusiasm that you have about whatever that topic is. So like I was saying, Mark and Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I know everybody's time is valuable, and I appreciate that the hour that you've given me and everyone watching tonight to learn from your knowledge and your experience. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Giles. It was fun.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And to all you people out there that are watching, thank you for showing up. Please like and subscribe if you can. And I hope to see everyone next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Mountain for another awesome episode. And they are all awesome because I said so, especially for the new folks that came out to support Mark. Very happy to have you. And I'm glad that you guys stuck around for a while with us. And with that, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next video.